Hi, I'm Anthony, and today I want to show you how to turn this into something like this. So I found these knobs to be very useful. I use them for clamping. I use them for holding down tools in certain situations. And I originally made some. I was going to make them so that they had the threaded inserts inside the knob itself, and then have another bolt going into it. However, I've since learned that you can take a tap, and here I have a 1/4-20, and put it into just about any kind of wood, whether it be hardwood, softwood, plywood, anything of that nature, and for what I need it for, this bolt will hold. So let me show you how I do it real quick. I did a whole bunch of them this afternoon, and I'm just going to go over the step-by-step process. And usually I do this in a batch setting where I'm making a whole bunch of them, because you need to make a whole bunch of them in order to make it worth your while. But I'm just going to do one or two. I only have a small piece of hardwood left here, and I'll make one for you and show you guys how I do it. So the first thing that I have, and is a key integral part of this whole operation, is a hole saw. This one here, however, I have a Diablo set, and it is a quick set. So it comes apart, these two different pieces. You can also take this drill bit out. Now, if you're using 5/16 bolts, like I did in some of my original ones, which I would recommend, this works great. The one that came with the kit works fantastic. However, I needed to make some smaller bolts, or I needed to use 1/4-20 bolts, and I needed to make some smaller knobs. So what I did, I went to the orange box store, Home Depot, and I got one of these bits. Now, one of these bits has the same ends on it. However, if you hold them up next to each other, they're not exactly the same. This one here has a little bit longer gap here. I don't know if that's where it's at, or if the end here is a little bit shorter. So I put this in my drill, reverse, and I spun it, and I ran a sander on it to try to eat some of this out, and took some off the end. I don't know what did it, but it happens to work now, and this is a 3/16 bit that I can use to run a 1/4-20 tap into. So now it works perfect for 1/4-20. If you don't have a bit like this, that's small enough to run a 1/4-20 tap into, this will take you forever, because I did it the other day, and it was nuts. It pissed me off so bad. Anyway, so I'm going to use the smaller bit for right now, just so that I can, if I need to, I can later on convert it to a 5/16 bolt if I need that. You're going to want a drill press. You don't need one, but it's ideal to have one. It's just going to make it a lot faster, a lot easier to do batch work. I'm going to do one big one and one smaller one. Normally I do 2 1/8, and I did it in this style. Actually, I score the line, and then I get my measurements for these 3 holes here. Now, I did it a little bit different on these smaller ones, because this takes so much time with the hole saw, cleaning it all out, pulling the plugs out. So what I did was I made different marks and just used a smaller bit to cut the grip. So I used a different style this time just to see if it would work. I think it works fantastic. You still have plenty of grip. You can grab onto it. So I'm going to do a big one, a 2 1/8 in this style, and also another smaller one in this style as well. So the first thing that I do is I poke a hole in it and score it. Now you have to be far enough away from the edges because of the way I do this. You don't want to have, you'll see here in a second why. So I'm just scoring it so I know where the circle's at. Okay. So when I do that, you're going to need some kind of combination square. It can be a big square like, or a speed square, anything that has a 45 on it. So now what I'm going to do is, because, and I'm here on the edge of the board so I can do it this way. Just going to take this, generally guess at the center of this hole, and mark this side and this side. And I didn't cut that with a square, so I'm going to do it this way. So you can do it in the center of the board or not. I just tucked my combination square, my short combination square, up against my speed square. Make sure it's touching along the sides there. Line it over to the center of the hole, mark the two edges. So now I have an X there. So now I can take my 45 and do the exact same thing. And I'm going to go across here and across this way. What you have is a circle with 8 spots on it, 8 marks on it, so that you can now drill your other smaller holes. So I'm going to also do a 2 1/8 inch bit. This big bit does not like this wood for some reason. It'd definitely be better if I had a clamp for that. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Is mark this across this way. And like I said, this goes a lot faster if you're doing batch work, where you're doing 8, 10, 12, 20 of these at one time. All right, so on these smaller ones, I used a 1/4 inch bit to get these little grips, these grooves. And for the bigger one, I think I'm going to may go with a 1/2 inch one on that. Let's give it a whirl. I like to put a backer board behind it just for blowout purposes. I just find the center of the groove, essentially, close as I can on the mark, and drill it all the way through. If you would want to score it just a little bit deeper, it would make your drill bit want to go into the center of that ring, so that would be in and out evenly all the way around. I didn't get this one all the way perfectly even. There's one I almost, it looks like I completely missed it. Now I know the 1/4 inch one works on the smaller ones, and this is a I used an 1 3/8 for the smallest knobs that I've made. 1 3/8 hole saw with a 1/4 inch bit for the grip, and I'm going to go with a 2 1/8 on the biggest one, and I'm going to go with a 1/2 inch for the grip. Well, I can tell you already, this is much faster than using a 1-inch hole saw and drilling 3 holes. Okay, so that's what that looks like. I've now got a cheese hole, cheese grate, cheese board. I got a piece of cheese full of holes. So that's what it should look like. I think you can see this original line in there where I made my eight marks. So now I go from here. Next step is to put the hole saw bits back on and cut that completely out. This is something that I've tested. I can flip it over. My bed must not be perfectly square. I've tested it many times, but I can flip it over and I always get a ring right in the center where it broke apart. So you want to have something where you can cut all the way through. So in my case, it doesn't go down far enough, so I have to do it this way. So you can obviously tell from there that I did not get my outside holes centered up. So if that's a concern of yours, then you may want to make a perfect circle so you know exactly where to drill down. You could even you could make the circle with a compass and everything first beforehand if you want to take that kind of time. So this is what it looks like after it comes out of there. So 1/2 inch, it's not bad. Maybe a little excessive. Could probably even stay with the 1/4 inch or maybe a 3/8. 3/8 would probably be the best one. And you don't want to come in too far. If you come in too far, you get like on this one here, you get that little hook back. I mean, it's great for grip, and it works perfect for that. And I got a little bit of that right there. So on this side here, it's almost perfect. This side here, I got a little bit too deep, and this one here has got a pretty big hook on it. Let me drill this other one out, and we'll go to the next step. All right, so here's what my little one looks like. There's one I almost missed it. And over here I got pretty deep. It'll still provide grip enough to turn it. So the next step I do is I take this out and I fashioned up a spindle of sorts. This is a 1/4 20 bolt that I cut the head off of. You can use 1/4 20 all thread. Either way, it all works the same way. So I just take this, put this in here, create a spindle to put those knobs on. But before I can put those on there, I need this. I've got a 1/4 20 tap here. Now, here's something that I have not tried yet, and you may want to do this. Instead of going all the way through like I just did, putting a bolt head on the top, carriage bolt head on the top, you could possibly start doing this, getting your hole saw or getting the circle scored to deep enough to where you can safely put it on there and cut it out without the center pin. Take the center drill bit out and just run all the way through it, and then put your drill bit just so it doesn't come out the other side, and have a smooth side on one end, and then you just run a piece of all thread in there and epoxy it in there, and then you would have one without a bolt head sticking out of the top. This is much faster. I'm sure it would look cool if you didn't have that, but for me, this suits my needs perfectly. So that's just an idea that you can do. So I got a 1/4 thread tap here, and I just take it and I run it through the center hole here. So now that I've tapped that, now I can use this to sand it. I just have a lock washer or lock nut on here. Turn that on. Got my piece of sandpaper right here, and we'll clean it up. This is a very dusty job, so I would recommend either a well-ventilated area like a fan blowing over you, or a dust mask. And while we're on this subject here, I also take this bolt and I put it up through here, and I bring this up here, and now I can take a chisel and true this up if it's not centered, or if you can get your drill press to be perfectly lined up. You can use this as a very short lathe. And I've used it to clean up epoxy. I had some longer ones that I had to make a long spacer here, and I had some epoxy sticking out and they weren't quite lined up. I stuck it in there and I just cleaned up that edge, got the epoxy off of it, and generally lined everything up so that everything looked nice. So let me finish sanding this out. Now you could also use this simply as a nut. Instead of putting a bolt through it, you could just use it as a regular nut. If you needed something to, if you had a, like say a slide mechanism and you had a bolt running through it and you needed something to, make a nut on the other end so that you can tighten it up to keep it from sliding, these would work perfect. I bought a bunch of metal inserts and it just wasn't worth it. I haven't ever stripped out anything yet with just running a tap through it and running a bolt into it. You could probably use a little bit heavier if you wanted to, make it a little bit quicker. So that's now what we have to work with for this part here. Let me do this little one here. I just rounded over the tops and the bottom edge just to give it a nice feel in your hand. And then if you really want to, you can take a piece of sandpaper and just go in each one of these little grooves. There's going to be a couple of them that have some tear out on the sides because of the way the grain is running. But it's generally a fairly quick process. So while it can take a while to set up and do one, if you're just doing one, but if you're doing, you could probably make enough of these to last you a lifetime in an afternoon. If you did your 2 or 3 different sizes, made them all with the small center bore, so that you can always upgrade to a larger bolt if you want, using 5/16, and it'd probably last you a lifetime. 20 of each size would be way more than I would ever need. Originally I think I made 12 or 13 of these big ones, some of them with a little bit longer bolt than others, and I haven't used all these yet. I needed to make these was making them for a specialty part where I couldn't get this size of a head into the spot that it needed to be, and it also needed to be 1/4, which is why I had to figure out that I could use that other bit. And it's a Ryobi bit, and I think it came in a kit of 4, and that was a 3/16 bit. that I had to modify to work so that I could tap it out for a 1/4 inch. So if I was making a whole bunch of these, this one here would probably be okay. It's not bad. This one here, I'd probably throw that one away just because it got so far off center. Like this one here barely made a groove in it. But if you're making a whole bunch of them, then you know some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad, and toss the ones you don't like and be done with it. So on this one right here, you can see I have an extra spacer here. And I did that because I wanted to be able to tighten something down, and all the pressure was here. It wasn't necessarily dragging out here. Now, I made some longer ones that had very similar style handles as these, but I had 1.5 inches of spacers here because of where it was going into. It was a tight space. I couldn't put the big handles in where it's at. And I'll put a picture in there. It's on the back of my Festool saw, and I use that to hold my sacrificial fence in place instead of using a Phillips screw or something like that. And it makes it easy. I can, tap out a 1/4 hole in the board and be done with it and just use those. Makes it easy to take on and off. So to show you what I did, I took a piece of 3/4. I drilled halfway through this. It's much easier and much faster to do it this way. It's cleaner. Drilled it full of holes and went a little over halfway through, so at least 1/4 inch thick. Afterwards, I took it and put it on my table saw, and I cut it out with these on the outside. If you cut it off with this side up against the fence, they will fall in there and they'll flip around and catch on the blade and just mess them all up. But if you cut them this way, the fence being here, you run them through like this, they'll fall out instead of falling back in and being trapped and being hung up against the blade. So that's how I made these. Then you don't have to dig them out of the hole saw. And generally I like to make these as big as I can. These here, I made them all 1 inch. And again, I threaded these all with a 1/4 tap. Some of my previous ones I have with a 5/16 tap. So the next step that I do then is to take, if you'd be using all thread, you would not need to do this step, obviously. But if you're using carriage bolts, this is the next step. So I just take this, and what I'm doing is I'm allowing for, so all I have here is this rather large 1/2 inch bolt. But you have this square side here. So I'm making a space for that right there. So find a Forstner bit that works for you. Just generally line it up. Centered over the hole as you can get. And go down. Just check your depth on what that square part there is and what you think it might be. So now that I've got those drilled out for that, here's where I would take my carriage bolt, and I don't even have one here to show you, but this is what it'll look like on the end. Say this is a carriage bolt. I'm going to run this up here like this. I get it up to about a 3/4 inch from the top. And obviously this does not have a carriage bolt head on it, so I can't show you, so I'm just going to go somewhere about right in there. So you have about 3/4 inch difference there to the top. I mix up my epoxy, take a little stick and just wipe it on there, and you just got to kind of play around with the amount that you like, because it will squeeze out if you have too much. If you don't mind squeeze out, it's not a big deal. If you mind it, you want to be careful with that. Put some epoxy in there, tighten it all the way up, I used to grab the tops if I can't get it in there all the way by hand. I'll grab the top with a vice grip or something of that nature and just hold it so I can twist it on there. But other than that, just tighten it up hand tight and it'll fasten on there. I do the same thing with the little standoff washer. Now you don't have to have these. Again, I gave you my reason for putting it on there. And I do the exact same thing. And here I go and I'll put a little bit of epoxy on the threads themselves. Then I will also put it around, on the bottom of that washer there, and then just tighten it up, same thing. And it'll pull itself in there nice and tight. This one got on there a little wonky, but it should be fun. Just do like that right there. And this is what you end up with. Now, if I really wanted to, and I didn't like that epoxy there, I could take and, this is how I did my earlier ones when I was cleaning them up. Just take some electrical tape or some kind of tape that would protect the threads. Put it in here, and then use my big bolt here and use a chisel and just clean out that edge right there and just chisel it out, just like a lathe. But that's all that's to it. So hope you guys enjoyed this quick tutorial. Something I figured out. It's pretty cool. I like it. It's not, is it efficient? Probably not. I'm sure you could, you can buy them for $4 or $5 and they're plastic. But the very first time I ever did this was making these, and I just needed to make some sawdust, clear my head, and I was just making sawdust. So I enjoy doing small things like this, just little touches here and there. No, you can't make them for anybody else and make any money unless you would have huge CNC machines, doing this type of thing. But this is just for me. It's a way you can do a shop-built knob. You can either use it as a nut, or as a bolt head. So thank you guys for watching. If you like these kind of videos, hit the like button. If you want more of them, hit the subscribe button. And as always, remember to positively impact those around you and to make today the best. Thanks for watching.